living off my son's earnings and you can't even manage the household chores. Every day, from morning till night, my mother-in-law would scrutinize my every move and repeatedly criticize me. At first, I thought she was just being naggy because she wanted attention, but I gradually realized this was what they call bullying by a mother-in-law. I tried to subtly bring it up with my husband, but he sided with his mom and wouldn't listen to me. Mom is just being strict because she cares about you. Respect your elders and bear with it while you can. His biased way of putting things made me just nod in resignation. I was afraid of what kind of retaliation I would face if I showed any defiance towards him. When my mother-in-law saw my husband scold me, she would be in a great mood. Fed up, I started to ignore both my mother-in-law and my husband, which led to an unexpected blunder by her and a furious outburst from him. I had always dreamed of becoming a mother since I was a child. Due to family circumstances, I didn't go to college but got a job at a local company. I met my current husband a few years later. I became a full-time homemaker right after we got married, per his strong request. I aspired to be a mother, not necessarily a housewife. I intended to juggle work, household duties, and motherhood. However, once we decided to get married, he said we would be moving into a multi-generational home he was renovating, and he wanted me to stay at home after that. I was torn, but I agreed for the sake of our family. A year into our marriage, we had a son, and in hindsight, it was better than quitting my job due to the pregnancy. Now, my son is in middle school. The multi-generational home we live in has separate entrances, and we hardly feel like we're living with my in-laws. Still, we see each other often since we're on the same property, but we maintained a respectful distance, so there were no major complaints. However, after my father-in-law passed away, the maintained balance began to collapse. My mother-in-law started showing up in our territory more often. When my father-in-law was alive, she rarely came over. I had a feeling since the beginning of our marriage that she didn't like me much. On the other hand, I found her abrasive personality difficult to deal with, but I thought the feeling was mutual. Yet, after my father-in-law died, she would come over in the morning and pick at me with her nagging remarks. Still doing housework? It's already noon. You must have been lazing around after sending off your son. She would say things like how shameless I was for living off my husband, being a laid-back homemaker who gets 3 meals a day from him. Feeling her loneliness since she didn't want to be alone after my father-in-law's death, I just kept apologizing profusely to her snide comments. Taking advantage of my non-confrontational attitude, she would act like she owned our place and continued to stay in our territory. Her attacks on me became more aggressive. Cooking greasy food for an elderly person, you're such an inconsiderate daughter-in-law. Then she should just eat at her own place. However, she would come to our house as soon as she woke up, demanding breakfast and making various requests for lunch. She would even start asking for help with laundry and demand a hotter bath. The last straw was dinner. The menu is tailored to our growing son, so it might be too greasy for my mother-in-law. My husband also expends a lot of energy at work, so we inevitably focus on meat dishes. Yet, she insists on lighter fare and wants seafood. Not only does my mother-in-law eat 3 solid meals a day, she also demands snacks at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., particularly specifying a certain type of dessert for her afternoon treat. Because she lingers around, I can't easily go out, and she accuses me of neglecting my household duties. My dear son works his tail off to feed you, a lazy bum who just takes it for granted, with 3 meals and naps included. What a life you lead. The disruption in my daily routine is all because of her. Neighborhood relations are tough, too, and at the urging of a dominant lady nearby, I joined a community circle. But after being accused of using my husband's money for outings, I couldn't go anymore. Later, a concerned neighbor lady contacted me to explain my situation. When I said I might not be able to attend for a while, she suggested I could join remotely. Participating via my smartphone led to accusations of being privileged enough to make purchases during the day. Even now, she claims I'm just slacking off on my phone, so I can't check it when she's around. When I do check my phone after she leaves, I often find several messages. Among them were messages from my husband scolding me, asking why, as a stay-at-home wife, I couldn't check messages immediately. All this stress gradually built up, causing my skin to break out. Then, my mother-in-law used my skin problems as fodder for her harassment. What's with all those spots on your face? Don't tell me you think they're a sign of youth. They're just pimples, because you're unhygienic. I'm criticized all day for not cleaning properly. I finally reached my breaking point and insisted that I was doing everything that needed to be done while still finding time for myself. I've been doing as much housework as I can. My husband has never complained about it. But the fact that I finally talked back seemed to have offended my mother-in-law. She became noticeably colder, and her face showed clear signs of hatred. She probably thinks I'm being too uppity for a daughter-in-law. I hoped this would keep her from coming to our house, but her retaliation was unexpected. She began to act like a child, ignoring me as a form of defiance. She pretended not to hear anything I said, even when I spoke directly to her. At first, I thought she would change her attitude after a few days, but when her ignoring me entered the 5th day, I started to worry. I tried to appease her, but she stubbornly continued her silent treatment for 3 weeks. The dinner table felt like a wake whenever she was present, and while she would talk normally to my husband, she switched to blatant ignoring when I joined. My husband would get upset during meals at the tense atmosphere we created, making things even more strained. Despite ignoring me, she still stayed in our house from morning till night. But since she was ignoring me, I was freed from her constant nagging during the day. Having upset her, I started to see the bright side, at least she wasn't nagging me. I don't know what's going on between you and Mom, but remember she's a veteran homemaker and her strict attitude comes from caring about you. Why resist and get so worked up when you should be grateful? Be more flexible. You're an adult. My husband also added this. He thinks I'm being mean to my mother-in-law. Apparently, she's been playing the victim and bad-mouthing me to him. It seems my mother-in-law, despite grieving the loss of her husband, has been telling people that I'm a terrible daughter-in-law who neither cares nor empathizes. If it were up to me, I'd throw those words right back at her. I've been the one putting up with her, who stays without reason and bosses everyone around as if she owns the place, all under the excuse of her mourning. Anyway, don't ever contradict Mom. Just obey without question and there won't be any problems. You respect your elders, got it? My husband sternly told me not to oppose or overstep my boundaries with my mother-in-law. I just nodded and agreed that he was right. Why should I be the only one who is spoken to this way? I had hoped that if anyone would be on my side, it would be my husband. Even if he sides with his mother, the least he could do is listen to my side of the story, but my frustrations seem endless. However, as a stay-at-home wife whose only increasing experience is in homemaking, I couldn't survive if kicked out by my husband. And considering my son's future, I tell myself to endure at least until he becomes an adult, a few more years. In fact, as my relationship with my mother-in-law worsened, my son's rebellious phase was also heating up. He's smack in the middle of his defiant years. And being too harsh or appearing indifferent could be misunderstood as uncaring, which scares me. I'm at a loss on how to handle it, with endless worries. The next morning, my mother-in-law arrived at our house in a very good mood. Got a harsh scolding from your son, didn't you? He's always been on my side. Even when I had disagreements with your father, he stood by me. He's a really kind, mother-loving boy. Her words implied that I was the only one left out with no place to belong. She must have foreseen this and lied to my husband. Unable to face her that morning, I continued my chores while ignoring her. All your fight seems to have gone out of you. Looks like your son has retrained you well. He really is a capable son. Then she declared that there was no place for me in this house. Internally, I thought, so it has come to this, but I kept my face neutral and quietly continued my tasks. Once she confirmed that I wasn't going to respond, she laughed loudly. Learn from this and never think of opposing me again. Whether you can stay here depends on my mood. With me silent, her behavior grew even more shameless. She rummaged through the refrigerator, took out several ingredients, and ordered, "Make something tasty with these." Then, she started demanding to eat expensive dish. She said I should express my apology through it, with her dictatorial thinking and attitude wearing me out. Luckily, it was just before my husband's payday, so I managed to dodge that, but her challenging demands continued. The attack of making a delicious meal with leftover ingredients lasted until dinner. Apparently, my obedience greatly pleased her. "Dinner time, unusually cheerful," she exclaimed, "that was fun, so refreshing," and left. Once my mother-in-law was gone, my husband, who had been silent during dinner, finally spoke. "You see? You can do it. Keep it up." It was a pleasant meal for a change. That night, after dinner, he drank 2 cans of beer, got excited about the sports news, and then went to bed. It felt like a throwback to our newlywed days. The relationship between my mother-in-law and me remained unchanged for the next few days. As I didn't talk back, her behavior became increasingly imperious. That afternoon, she grabbed my shoulders and pressed on. "What's going on with the household items that are supposed to come monthly? They haven't arrived," she started, clearly upset as we were already out of stock. Actually, since my father-in-law was alive, I had been arranging a subscription service for my in-laws' household supplies, especially for heavy items like bottled water and detergents. Initially, I suggested it because my father-in-law was weakening and struggling with the heavy shopping. He was grateful, but my mother-in-law never acknowledged it. My husband told me to follow the example of my seniors in life. "Isn't it shameful as a senior to rely on someone younger?" "Well, if someone like you can manage, then of course I can do it too. I was just testing to see how capable you were," she retorted with a huff. A few days later, she stormed into our house like a hurricane. Though she was red with anger last time, now she was pale with shock. Items I didn't order have been delivered in bulk. It seemed impossible for such a mix-up to happen. I assumed it was just a minor error on her part, like hitting the wrong quantity. While half listening to her complaints about weird sales calls and an influx of sale emails every day, I thought nothing of it. I've never received such calls. And while I do get sale emails, it's only once or twice a week. What had she done? But as she kept ranting, I realized she might have fallen for a scam. It seems she ordered from my father-in-law's computer, which hadn't been used since his death. A backlog of scam emails had accumulated, and she unknowingly clicked on one thinking it was a legitimate sale. My mother-in-law ordered household items from that website, but what actually arrived were luxury food items, including expensive crab and several boxes of A5-grade beef, costing thousands of dollars. The bill turned out to be astronomical. She had entered her address and credit card details, falling victim to a fraudulent shipping scheme. Luckily, my husband was home that day, so he quickly learned of the situation. Ignoring her rants, he blamed me. "Why did you let Mom handle the online shopping? You always used to do it, why not now?" I thought since she said she could handle it, she should. "That's just old folks' pride talking." "I can't read your mother's mind, I just did as she said she could handle." That's when my husband shouted, "Don't give me that excuse." Our son, who had been in his room, could hear the shouting and came out. The shouting was loud enough to be heard in my son's room. When he retreated to his room, he would blast music and avoid interacting with us. This is common during the rebellious phase, but my husband blamed it on my lack of discipline. Our son's behavior became increasingly unmanageable, defiant even to my husband. Despite several reprimands from him, our son just plunged deeper into his rebellious phase. Although he isn't violent, perhaps this is still better than some alternatives. And there he was, standing in front of me, almost as if shielding me. "Enough already! Why are you all ganging up on Mom like this?" My son stood up for me and revealed to my husband just how awful his mother had been. "Mom is not Grandma's servant or Dad's slave. Stop being so cruel to her." It's true what they say, kids may seem oblivious, but they observe more than anyone. While appearing disinterested in family affairs, my son was fully aware of what was happening. If you think I'm just being rebellious, it's because Dad and Grandma have been provoking me. In reality, my mother-in-law had been enjoying tormenting me daily during her lengthy visits, but it wasn't just me she was meddling with. She even interfered with matters regarding my son. She claimed his defiant attitude stemmed from having bad friends and that continuing this way would prevent him from getting into a prestigious high school or college. She even said it would be a disgrace for generations. My life is mine to decide. I don't want to be dictated by a grandma who does nothing but give orders. It's annoying. My husband took his mother's side and treated me horribly because of it. Feeling ashamed to have a father like him, my son strained to say these words. Please, don't disappoint me anymore. If you're going to be a father, at least try to look respectable in front of your son. As a mother, it's my duty to protect my son. A mother must always be on her child's side. Realizing that my selfish belief had caused him so much pain, my heart ached and I wept. I thought I was protecting my son, but in reality, he was the one protecting me. If that's the case, I no longer have to endure being under the control of my mother-in-law and husband. Keeping such a wonderful child in this toxic environment is not good for him. I apologized to my son for not noticing his true feelings while I was too busy appeasing my mother-in-law and husband. No more being at the mercy of you or Grandma. I want a divorce. Just so you know, I'll fight it out if I have to. I packed the bare essentials and left the house with my son. For now, we decided to stay at my cousin's inn. After that, my husband, reluctant to accept the divorce, contacted me several times to reconsider. I heard that even my mother-in-law had finally quieted down. According to my husband, she had been using his credit card without his knowledge, and because it was fraud, no compensation was available. Despite his claims, I knew the truth wasn't so. Wanting to please his mother, my husband had actually given her one of his cards and told her she could use it as she pleased. The reason she couldn't get any compensation was that she shopped with a card not in her name, falling victim to the scam. Moreover, she claimed that she only entered the card details and her address on a fake site, but even doing just that was terrible. Because of this, not only did she receive relentless sales calls, but she felt watched and even had door-to-door salespeople bothering her at home. Frightened to go outside, she is now practically a recluse. The situation also compromised my husband's card information, leading to a significant amount of fraud. Even my usually supportive husband couldn't side with his mother this time, furious that she hadn't told him about the damage sooner. Yet, when he scolded her, she cried, claiming she was not at fault and that it was his fault for giving her the card, without a single word of apology. His patience wearing thin with his mother's unrepentant attitude, the mood between them has grown quite hostile. That's the situation, so please, you're all I have left. Let's try to start over as a family of 3. Even now, after all you've said, my mind hasn't changed. And don't contact me directly anymore. If you need to talk, go through my lawyer. My husband was saying something on the phone, but I ignored him and hung up. It seems my husband kept calling frequently without giving up. However, I was working as a maid at an inn through my cousin's connection, so I never noticed those calls. By chance, my son noticed the incoming call and ended up speaking with my husband. My husband tried to persuade him to convince me to come back. He tried to tempt him with sweet words, saying that staying with him, who has financial stability, would mean less hardship, especially with upcoming tuition costs. But my son didn't buy it. Dad, you're broke because of Grandma's mess. What are you even talking about? Plus, Mom's really happy now, she smiles so much. Don't contact us again. Just let her go and get the divorce. If you try to mess with her happiness, I'll never forgive you for the rest of my life. My husband, as a husband, a man, and a human being, was the worst. But apparently, he still had some pride as a father. Being told by his son that he would never forgive him must have been quite a shock, because I got word from the lawyer that he agreed to the divorce. Seeing my son now, I feel reassured that my parenting wasn't wrong. My son, having graduated from high school, said he wants to work and attend night school. I believe he can handle any tough choices, but I strongly hope to provide him with more options.